So hello everyone. Welcome to the ACFC meeting. This is my first time chairing any town committee. So I'm excited to make a bunch of mistakes. So feel free to correct me when I do things wrong and when I go in the wrong direction or whatever. But thanks everyone for coming. Thanks for the folks online as well, people from the public for joining us. Ian, could you do me a favor? Can you turn down the volume? I don't know if it's on one of our computers, but I can hear myself talking back at myself.
Okay.
It would just be there's like a volume.
Okay.
You just open up your own copy.
Yeah, and I actually just type right in the minutes and then just get rid of the stuff.
Oh yeah, because we all have edit right.
Yeah.
Oh, Ian, it's your computer. If you can just turn down the volume on that.
I should be. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Great. Thank you. So we're waiting on Cecilia to have quorum, so we're not going to talk about the minutes from last time until she gets here. So we'll do some adjustments there. We do have, in addition to the agenda, Ian, do you remember which that one was? Were we going to add something to the agenda that didn't make it in, or did that make it? Did that make it in?
Nope. But I'm aware.
Okay, cool.
I have a couple.
Oh, okay.
The first is I didn't see any public comment.
Oh,
we're going
yes.
to just zip it in after each section or whatever, but I didn't see public comment.
Yes.
The second is that our subcommittee has been in contact with Tyler Misha. He wanted to come to this meeting, but teaches a class. So can't tune in until 7:30. If we run over, we'll see him available to answer questions. Otherwise, he'll come to another meeting.
Okay.
And the third was I just wanted to spend 1 minute with a remark on the letter we all received from the director of the Vermont Mountain Bike Association.
Great. And just want to note that letter was not written to a committee member, so just be aware that was not that was meant to be circulated. That was a reply to someone else's question, not someone within the ACFC. So I just want to be delicate with how we make public information that was not intended to be made public. Does that make sense?
Sure. I still have one remark.
Totally. Yeah, you can make them early.
Yeah, I know I omitted to put anything about public comment on the agenda. That was my omission.
Yeah.
We haven't allocated a particular time, but based on what I think we're establishing now as the rule is there is time at each item on the agenda.
Yeah. Do we want to? We don't do public comment at the beginning, right? We do it after every.
We usually do it after. We've been trying to do it after each topic, right?
Yes.
Our new model as opposed to like leaving it all till the very
end. Right. But we don't do it at the beginning of. Okay. Perfect. Melissa, did you want to make your comment now? Does that make sense?
Sure.
Cool.
I just like to say one quick comment is I feel like in not making that letter public, but I feel like it would be beneficial for someone, that would be someone from Richmond Mountain Trails or someone from this committee. Hey, Cecilia, to respond to this person who's over an organization for the whole state and let them know that no one is deliberately pursuing any requirements that are inappropriate so as to impair us.
Okay.
I'm concerned about that for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
And I'll leave it at that.
Cool. Yeah, we can figure out how to navigate that continued conversation. Thanks for the comment. So now we have quorum. Hi, Cecilia.
Hi, Cecilia.
Sorry, I'm late. It was unavoidable.
No big deal.
minutes, then I guess we
Yeah.
can do with a quorum and vote on it.
Great. Does anyone have any additions, edits, changes to the September minutes? Great. Can I have a motion to approve last month's minutes?
Move to approve last month's minutes.
Segundo. All right, all in favor?
I
Aye. The ayes have it. Great. So we have a Trails Committee and Conservation Committee brief report.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right. Sorry, I was jumping ahead.
That's okay. And was that, Ian, was that just an update on what those two committees are up to?
Especially in relation to the Founders Forest, I would say. I mean, we can all read their agendas and minutes, but if there is information or points to be raised relating to from the two representatives for those committees, so you've been, of course, one of them.
I can go quickly on the RCC, which we're actually working on. This is not directly related to the Andrews Community Forest, but on installing salamander crossing signs like they have in Huntington in Richmond, which is really great. And so that is sort of affected by the ACF because one of the areas is on Route 2, and we won't put up signs yet because Route 2 has different jurisdiction than like the other roads in Richmond, but it's the start of that, and it would be really cool to have that eventually there on Route 2. But there's some salamander crossings in Richmond, and so signs will go up this fall, and then will be activated in the spring.
So will there be on Dugway Road or just on Route 2?
It'll be Cochrane Road, the top of West Whitehill, or Gillette Pond, the top of Gillette Pond, and then Route 2 is the other spot where we know there's a crossing, but we're looking at potential other spots too in Richmond. So this is kind of like a pilot year of getting them installed and seeing how they go. And if more get on our radar, we'll put more up. Cool. Chase, any RTC updates?
Yeah, so we had Kate Aiken from Richmond Mountain Trails come to our meeting, and she shared that they have a really successful outreach engine, Richmond Mountain Trails does right now, and they're getting a lot of town members who want to volunteer on multi-use trails that aren't mountain bikers, but like their outreach is such that a lot of people are contacting them saying, I drop my kid off and then I have a couple hours, while they're at daycare, I'd love to just go do some trail work. And so they were wanting to take on a larger role in management of town trails. And so we were looking at some projects where we could really outline a project and hand it over to them, but not give them like the river trail per se without us as a town committee really approving the scope of work. And then I approached them about future management of Andrews, and I did this with the Trails Committee, and everyone felt like it could be a good potential fit because the trail stewardship plan would be outlining the scope of the maintenance. And so Richmond Town Trail Committee wouldn't need to be an intermediary in there. And Richmond Mountain Trails was interested in, when we get to that point, being the maintenance arm. And so they confirmed interest in that. And Richmond Trail Committee felt fine with that because the stewardship plan would guide the work. There wouldn't be any need for a trail committee in there.
Actually, well, 2 points. One, I think maybe we covered is the ultimate responsibility to the town and for the town trails is the Trails Committee. So that shouldn't be delegated. But obviously, if other members of the community are providing help, then under some supervision of the Trails Committee, that's important. When I was on the Trails, the second point, when I was on Trails Committee, I remember the issue of insurance was raised. When we would have work parties, we were concerned that people who were working on trails would be covered by the town insurance. I don't remember the details of that, but I think in principle, town committees are covered by the town insurance. And people working under their supervision are covered. I think that should be.
But RMT may not be, you're saying?
Well, I mean, considering that the RMT people would be members of the community at large, from the point of view of assisting the Trails Committee, which has ultimate responsibility, would those people be insured? You know, if they getting injuries or anything. So
you're saying you think that even in a future Andrews scenario, Richmond Trails Committee would need to be responsible for maintenance?
I think it should be looked into. I'm not sure I'm the authority on that, but I would recommend the Trails Committee look into the question of authority and responsibility and insurance.
Sounds like a question for Josh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Around, the insurance piece of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting of the Trails Committee having to maintain that just as a result of it being the Andrews Community Forest being a result of it being public. Just getting clarity around who would oversee that, because we also have a committee of people who could do that work as well. So it would be interesting of who.
That's what I was thinking, is that Andrews would be the responsible body.
Right, that's right.
And so RTC wouldn't be needed.
Right.
And Andrews manages the stewardship plan, which dictates the level of maintenance.
Right.
And so Andrews rather than RTC, but point well taken. Yeah.
Yeah. And this will be relevant to the Andrews Forest at some point.
Yeah.
So glad you raised it now.
Yeah. And Chase, is this would RMT do this at no cost, or are they looking to have us pay for?
I would. Well, that's a good question. Also, I'm assuming no cost, and I think they're feeling like they've happened into they have a big membership, and they sit on most of the membership funds that go back to the chapters, but they don't actually manage many of the trails. I think they manage Chamberlain, a couple of things on that side of town, but there are other groups doing a lot of the trail work, so they want to be able to help and share their resources a little more.
Okay.
And that's time on that.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, any public comment?
Just a quick question. Chase, the people are going to which committee? The would-be volunteers are approaching which, the Trails Committee or RMT?
Yeah, RMT is the VIMBA chapter.
Yeah.
And they approached the Trails Committee and said, we have a lot of resources to share. How can we be more helpful?
But the people who are dropping their kids off at school looking to get involved.
Yeah, are in touch with RMT saying, how can we volunteer? Okay. We love the town trails.
I wasn't sure. I just
and they're interested in working on multi-use specifically because they're not bikers per se.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I think that was just the start of the whole conversation.
Yeah.
But they're a willing group that could be an asset for Andrews in the future.
Great.
That's great.
Could I add something? Add something? This is Marcy Harding. And I don't know if it's relevant to this discussion, but you've mentioned Richmond Mountain Trails a lot. And one thing that has crossed my mind that I'd just like to throw out there is I've looked at Richmond Mountain Trails website from time to time this summer and fall. And what I see, including today, is that just about all of the trails are closed. And I think it's probably because of damage that was done on July 11th, the storm that we had. And I'm just wondering if you, as the Andrews Forest Committee, working on a trail plan and a management plan, have gotten any information about the extent of the damage to trails that could be useful as you plan your next steps forward? It seems like we kind of have an ideal scenario here with a very bad storm that I'm imagining washed out a lot of heavily used mountain bike trails on steep slopes that may be informative as you move forward.
Marcy, the document, the trails open and close based on current conditions, and because of the rains, it's been such a rainy summer, they close, and so they open as soon as they're dry enough that they're not vulnerable to damage. The only ones that are currently closed because of long-term damage are, I think, is Jericho, Old Jericho Road, and it's still open to walk, but it's just dangerous, and the bridge is out, and so it's use at your own discretion. But this gets updated daily based on eyes on the trail. Is it dry enough that it won't get damaged by people using it?
Okay.
Thank you, Marcy, for the comment. And yes, definitely having eyes on the ground for how storms have affected trails definitely influences our thinking about, trail sustainability in the long term. So
RMT did have several or multiple employees this summer working on repairing trail damage. So it was an issue.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Were you able to draw some conclusions based on what you saw, what you observed after the storm, like which trails held up and which ones got washed out and stuff like that?
Marcy, that's a good question. I'm going to move us forward, though. I think we might get down into a rabbit hole of trail, but I appreciate your comments.
Okay.
As we get further into sort of looking at deeper at trails, at some point these questions will be really relevant. So I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to keep us on time because we have a tight agenda. But thank you. Great. I'm going to move us to our next agenda item. So we have this is just a quick share out, a few minutes. Ian had checked in about updating the ACFC email address. We wanted to get a town one. We were not able to do that, so we're sticking with the Gmail account. So we will have that that will stay as our primary email. So if folks do have questions, like for instance, Brad, I had emailed you saying I'll send you the new email address. Well, we're back to the Gmail address. And we also changed our recruitment language on the website to say that we're accepting applications, but there is no deadline. So Ian and I decided that, instead of just having a deadline on there, because we were sort of searching for or putting out the word for new applications, that we just take off the deadline, and we can talk about that more today.
Which had passed anyway.
Yeah, which had passed. So there you go. And we standardized our meeting, so that's the fourth Monday of every month, as opposed to, I think it was the last, which was awkward because there's 5 Mondays in October. So we just changed that.
So all those 3 changes have been made by Duncan to our website page.
Yeah.
My understanding was that Nick had somehow gotten the authority to edit our webpage. Am I mistaken? Will we always have to go through Duncan, or if one of us wanted to, could we edit it?
I can ask Duncan about that. If one of us can have the permission to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if it's, I'm not like on the management team now, so maybe it's not an issue, but I just remember he was able to post things really quickly.
Yeah.
And he could manage the text. He didn't have to go through somebody else.
Yeah, I can ask Duncan if that is possible. If we just
I've already asked him.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Well, and I have a video that shows us how to do it. As the website is set up to make it reasonably easy for committee members who have once they have a password to. And this committee used to have previously had somebody who was doing that, as you point out. Yeah, we've that would be a good idea, wouldn't it, for one of us to be trained and authorized to do that.
Great. So I'm assuming there's no comments on that. The next item is applications for ACFC vacancies. Okay, so a little bit of the back story here, which is prior to us taking the deadline off of the applications, we had a window in which we would accept applications. Then we would, so in theory, this is how it goes. We collect applications and then we submit those to the select board. We also share those applications with Richmond Mountain Trails and with the Richmond Conservation Commission. Those two Trails Committee. Sorry. Whew. And they can basically rank or prioritize applicants that they think would be a good fit to represent those respective committees. And I think, and I'm not actually 100% sure on this, that this committee would also say to the select board, here's our sort of like recommendation for applicants we think would be strong contenders for this position. So that was the previous scenario, is sort of we'd have a batch of people and we would submit them all to the select board. But now we have, when we took off the date, we sort of said, oh, if anyone applies, we're excited, right? Like we just have gotten almost 0 applications, which means that the process of having, say, one single person apply, that process doesn't really work of us. So, I mean, I guess we could give that application to both committees and say, do you want to have this person maybe as a representative? But we can't necessarily like rank that person or prioritize one person. It's a different system. So we could say, do we think this person is a good fit, is not a good fit? Although that seems like that strays really far away from the original intent of having sort of a batch of people. It wasn't to say good fit, bad fit, but it was rather to say, wow, this person has like a lot of experience in things that we think would be really valuable. And so we're gonna sort of recommend that person. So we do have one application currently, and we want to figure out what we're going to do with applications rolling forward so that we can have the same process for someone who has applied as people who might apply in the coming weeks. One thing we could do is we could say, we're going to accept applications for 1 month or 2 weeks or whatever it is. And then we're going to do the same process that we did before. Like we're going to, give those applications to the RCC and the RTC and let them decide. And then we'll come together next meeting and we can sort of like have a discussion about that. Or we could simply submit that app, whenever an application comes in, we could say, okay, it's going in a basket and it will be submitted to the select board for approval. So we're not really sure exactly what the best way to proceed is. And looking to you all for help.
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying, that we can't like rank them and say how they fit. I think in the past, like the very first time, when the only time we really had to compose the whole committee, we had a lot of applicants. We sort of, I believe we put forward a slate with our reasons for choosing all of them. But of course, the select board could look at all the other applicants for whatever reason. So the only thing I didn't get from the end of, I was following you right till the end, was whether, like we have one applicant, I don't know when that person applied, whether the Conservation Commission or Trails Committee had a chance to look at that and say, okay, we want them to be our person.
They have not, yeah.
Okay, it seems like we should allow that step.
Yes.
Even though it'd be nice to move forward someone, because my understanding is this committee is moving forward one person, the other 2 committees pick people or recruit people and then move them to us and then on. And maybe we can write just a letter to the select board about how this person fits rather than try to rank them, if there are pros and cons or do we want to make comments to the select board about anyone we advance?
Yes, that's a good question that we have as well, since it is up to the select board to decide. We can do that if we want, or we can simply give it to the select board.
Yeah, one trails, one conservation, and one
One
open.
yeah.
So it seems like no matter what or how many come in, they would still go to those other committees to see if that committee feels like it's a fit for their seat, and then if one says yes, okay, or if they both say yes, then they'll have to decide.
Right.
If they both say no, then that
We can still
open
decide.
to here to be considered. And the last time we did have questions that we asked applicants. When we had our meeting over in the middle.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what we did.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the background right now is that there have been bylaws for this committee since 2018, which spell out a process. The joint meeting with the select board maybe 2 or 3 months ago made it clear that select board wanted that process to be followed more thoroughly, such that our 2 advisory other town committees would have the opportunity to provide recommendations on auto commons or on applications that come in. And so that process was written down in greater detail than it is in the bylaws by Cecilia and me. And so that procedure, while it's dated the 17th of August, on the one I printed out, so we have that as additional guideline. What it means right now is that if an application that came in recently should have the opportunity to be considered by the Commission and the Trails Committee prior to our next meeting in November. So using that cycle, it unfortunately, it delays the evaluation of applications coming in, but it's following the procedure that is in the bylaws in general and as a result of the joint meeting with the select board in particular.
Mm-hmm. If we send it to both of those committees, we would assume they could have it back before they could have their comments back before our next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
That's my message.
Yeah.
Yeah, please put it on your agenda because the committee and the commission do have the application that came in, because the town administrator said, town manager sent it to all 3 committees.
Yeah.
And the select board, actually.
And that is time on that item. So I'm just letting you know.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. So, and I know that it's unfortunate to have to wait a month after someone has applied to kind of move the process along. I know that's kind of just a bummer, but I also think that I want to put process first, and it doesn't seem like, if we do the right process, then I think we'll end up saving time in the long run than trying to rush something through. So I agree with Ian. I think what we could do is, it would be great if we could do another push for the open position. So if we can advertise again on Front Porch Forum, reach out to people if you know them, anyone who might be interested. I've talked to a handful of folks who said they're interested. I haven't seen any applications come through, but I have talked to people. So I think if we can do that in the next couple of weeks, perhaps we'll get another application. And if not, that's okay. Then we're doing the right process, even though we may only have 1 application. That's totally fine.
Everybody try to ask 3 friends this month.
Yeah. So we will forward the application received and any applications that come in to the RTC and RCC for review. And I think at the next meeting, we can review any applications that have come in, and I think at that meeting, we can decide if we're, how we want to either prioritize or rank or pros and cons or whatever it is, and then send that information to the select board. And then maybe the RTC or the RCC also has information that just gets accumulated and then sent to the select board for their information when they're deciding member appointments. Does that work for folks? Cecilia, you look pensive.
It was we can send their information in from the other committees. I thought those committees were supposed to say this person or these 3 people we want for our seat.
I know, and this is where it gets tricky because if it's one person, then
Trails and Conservation Commission can fight over them.
right. Exactly.
They would also probably compromise.
Right. But I mean, at some point we need to designate what seat a given person is filling and make sure that that committee is
I
in
think
agreement
before
with.
it's sent along to the select board, it would be designated at that time.
Okay,
right?
yeah, I
don't
just
think
didn't
the
hear
select
that. I
board-
just thought
Yeah.
they were getting that suite of information.
Oh,
that
I'm
they're gonna have
sorry.
to Sort out, but
Yeah,
okay.
if RTC and RCC wants to fight over it, we'll do an arm wrestling match, and then the winner can appoint the person.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Rock, paper, scissors. Way more civil. Yeah, so we'll navigate that before, but then I think if,
Okay,
all the 2 committees, and we can submit information to the select board. That I think if there's one person, it might look different than here's our top 3 picks. We might,
right.
that process just doesn't work, but we can figure that out next time.
It seems like we're gonna need to make this a rolling thing. Like
Yes.
when somebody comes in, we can put them forward, and that's when the committees can decide, okay, we think this person would represent our interests well on the Andrews Community Forest, and nominate them through, and other people we can decide if either of the other committees don't want. Because I don't think we're going to get that slug of people, and could be open for a while.
That's a great point. Yeah, totally. We'll be able to create the process and then carry it through until we have a full board, full member committee. Great.
Subcommittee report.
Oh, well, I want to just open up the
I'm sorry.
public comment at the end of that.
Right. Sorry. Yes.
And if we're running a little behind, so if folks want to
We're not bad, actually.
we're not too bad, just a little bit. I'm just trying to keep people on.
I have a
does it-
question.
Yeah.
Um,
Just identify yourself, so I'm not quite sure who's talking.
sorry, it's Dan
Oh, hey, Dan.
Wolfson.
Go ahead, Dan.
Since you have a rolling process now with no deadline, why wouldn't you talk about the applicant tonight and decide if you're interested in the applicant, and then they could go to the RCC and the Trails Committee to see if either of them want this person, and then to the select board. That would save you a month in the process. So the rolling process would take, you guys look at the application when it comes in, and then it'll save you a month. Otherwise, it's going to take 2 months for every application.
Yeah,
You need people.
that's a really good point, Dan. And I think in the future, we'll definitely do that. For this time, we got the application, and then Ian and I met and we talked about how we were going to navigate this. And we didn't have time to send the application out to the full committee prior to this meeting. And so that's why we're delaying the month, which is unfortunate, but you're absolutely right. Like in the future, we will, as soon as we get an application, now that we know the process, we will send that out immediately to the committee members.
Well, yeah, so that is, on this occasion that has happened. The full committee has the application, but isn't going to discuss it until we get input from the other 2. Is that correct?
I don't think I have the
I don't think I have
application.
the application.
I don't-
Yeah, we didn't send it out.
I think I did. I thought I did. I'll check. I'll have to check on it should be in everybody's inbox, but if not, I will do that. I should do that.
Oh, wait. I see one on Sunday. Hold on. Oh, wait.
Today's
Application
Monday.
sent to co-chairs
Yesterday.
on Monday,
Okay.
but not forwarded to the rest of
Friday,
you.
I think.
So there
It
was
did
one.
come in yesterday.
So it's just yesterday. So I don't know if that's enough time to review, and it wasn't. And are we going to post these online for the public beforehand?
Yes, and we also don't have an agenda item for today of discussing any applicants, so I also want to honor our current agenda.
That's fine. That's good.
But Dan makes a good point of trying to be more efficient in our process, which is a good reminder. Does anyone else have any other comments? Yeah, Brad.
I have a question. So what's news to me is that applicants they don't need the pre-committee approval, but
No.
have to go through the
A
review.
letter from.
The select board will ultimately decide, but I don't recall that as being, and I could be wrong, but I don't remember that happening in the past. I mean, did, for instance, you were the Conservation Commission rep, right?
Yeah.
One of them.
Yep.
Did your application go through Trails and?
No, because
guys?
I was on the RCC first, and that's how I was the appointed. I think the only reason why applications would go to both committees would be because there's a slot that the RTC and RCC fill by having a nominee.
Yeah.
And we would want to see, hey, would you like to have this person as your representative? That's why we would contact both committees.
Because the town is collecting them all in a centralized place, and before the Conservation Commission, particularly, and Trails, because those positions are people who are already on the committee. They didn't really need to have a whole thing from the town. They're like, okay, who on the committee can serve on the Tangents community? And somebody probably, I don't know if people not twisted your arm.
That's what I was like,
raised
I'll
your
do it.
hand.
Yeah.
And then it went to it. So they're both they sit on both committees, whereas this other position is not on the committee, but that committee
how about
wants.
Melissa? Did you have to?
She's at large.
But how was that decided? I mean, was she?
There was no opening on the committee when you came in.
There were no openings on the RC.
So the only
Richmond
seat.
Conservation Commission or the Trail Commission when I came. The only open seat was the open seat. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah.
So Ian and Melissa, they just came to this committee, and Julian came to the committee directly because there was no open seat
Yeah.
on the other committee.
So applications would just be sent to the committee saying, do you think this person would be a good fit as the representative from your committee?
Yeah, and if they don't want one, then they just say no, not for us.
Yeah.
Was this application for the open seat or for one of the committees?
That's the ambiguous thing. We have each of the committees and one open seat.
Yeah.
So we have 3 openings right now, so they could be any of those.
What did that part of the letter say?
What letter?
The applicant's letter.
I don't know.
Because did it specify?
You mean that like form that's filled out online?
No, the letter of interest.
Oh, you mean whether it says I want to be a Trails or a.
I don't know. We don't have to belabor it, but and I've probably been operating under the wrong assumption, but I would think that if somebody wanted to represent the Trails Committee, they'd write and say, hey, I'd love to be the Trails Committee rep. And they'd write to the Trails Committee. And then copy you guys, and then.
I don't think they have to apply to Andrews Community Forest.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that you would farm out. But...
See, the complaint that the select board originally had, and maybe it was because they didn't understand our unique bylaws that they agreed to, but their complaint was, well, each of these committees are selecting their own people and giving us one person, and we don't want
That was
that.
the whole accusation of like nepotism.
Right.
Where they said we lacked.
Even though that was what our bylaws said, was that the Conservation Commission, the Trails Committee would forward their recommendations to this committee, and then this committee would forward it to the select board to be approved, because only they can approve it.
Right.
So the compromise to try and meet our bylaws and their concern that friends were handpicking their friends to go forward with no choice given to the community was to announce this broadly several times from Quorum. Have one thing that everybody on the select board can look at, our committee can look at, the other committees can look at, one list of applicants. We still go through the process of each committee forwarding their best candidate or candidates if more than one meet their criteria, and then we forward it all up to the select board. So that's why it looks different than you remember.
Yeah.
And it was sort of a compromise to meet the sort of open, inclusive, let's invite everybody with our bylaws that say this committee forwards these people and the other committee forwards the other people. And it's all supposed to make us work happily together across difference, but it just got a little complicated.
And so what Cecilia was just outlined was written down after that joint meeting with the select board, and it identifies step one is the vacancies are announced and submitted to the select board, applications submitted to the select board. Number two is applications arrive until a stated deadline. They are sent to the Trails Committee, the Conservation Commission, and this committee for review. So that's the process that sort of emerged from that meeting, was that all applications would go to the to all three committees.
If it were me,
I missed that detail.
yeah, if it were me, I'd have a checkbox on the form so that people don't have to review extraneous applications, but we're using the same Google form or whatever it is that they use for all the committees on all the committees for the town. So we didn't really have that.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks.
All right, Melissa, let's do this.
Ready?
All right.
Onward.
Yes, onward. Thank you all.
We have an awesome subcommittee. It was really nice. We dropped Julian for the last time, and we had Ian, we had you, and we had me, and lots of technical difficulties.
That's true.
But we went for the low-hanging fruit of really trying to get something up at the kiosk. And so we worked on the sign and the map to put up there. The rules are based on the management plan that is currently in place, as well as the conservation easement. They are rules for the moment. When the management plan revision is finished, it's possible that there will be changes, as well as changes to the map. The map shows basically what's there right now, and the goal is to orient people who are using the forest right now. This list of rules in the map are for now, not for the future. They're for people who are going there tomorrow or whenever we get it up there. The map shows current trails, and it shows the vast trails. It shows logging roads, and it gives a very brief description of what may be used for what purpose. And it's a very clear and concise set of rules.
This is a little different than how I thought we left the conversation. This map, where we had talked about making all the trails the same color.
That didn't get.
Okay. And we had talked about different language in the key down at the bottom, not indicating allowed and not allowed.
Right, that's in the rules portion.
Because that's in the rules.
Yeah, I know.
And this is the map that we discussed, isn't it?
Right.
This past week.
So it was getting really hard, I think, for all of us to hear. But
it hasn't been modified since.
We need to
circle
back around to the changes we talked about.
That's our next item.
Because there's a red and there's no red below, right?
But we have that on our next agenda item.
Item is to roll into this.
Which we can do.
Yeah, and we can just roll straight forward. We had talked about some other things, but for the sake of time, we can just roll right into this.
The 10 rules were excellent, concise, smart, well written, lovely.
I just had one thing when I was looking at them. It says hunting is permitted after dark. So I thought that it should just include hunting in the list of things that are permitted, and then say hunting is also permitted after dark and before dawn, because some people might read that and think, oh, hunters are only allowed here after dark. Because
got it. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Do you see that, Ian?
Yeah.
And what hunting is allowed after dark?
Share screen with a bit of luck.
Well, it would be before dawn.
Do you say hunting?
Yeah, because I thought hunting at night.
Yeah, we actually had this conversation with Nick last time because he was like the hunting representative, and it's more about going into the forest and kind of getting set up. But I think it's actually, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you cannot shoot a firearm in the dark.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah, I
thought.
think
it's-
that's true.
You know, but if you do get a deer or something, you're taking it out of the woods and it's after dark, like that's.
Right, because I assumed it was sort of, yeah, at the beginning or the end, but you can't actually hunt. So maybe we should even change the word from hunting to hunters are also,
Hunters are allowed access.
are permitted when it's dark or something.
When it is dark, right, that covers dusk and dawn.
Mhm.
And then you're right, include hunting up top with dawn till dusk.
Walking, running, skiing, and
You
hunting.
could throw in, per state regulations too.
Yeah,
Is there specific, it's like a half hour after sunset, or you can
That's
shoot,
good.
but yeah, you can set up, shoot, middle of the night.
yeah, so that makes sense.
I saw some cars there on youth opening.
Oh,
So now we've got it in place. Melissa, you were looking at item number 1 relating to hunting, were you?
That's right.
And the point you wanted to make about that, I may have missed it.
To say the forest is open from dawn until dusk for walking, running, skiing, hunting, and other non-mechanized recreation. Hunters may also use the forest in dark, I don't know, before dawn and after dark per regulations.
For state regulations, something like that.
Mhm.
Our hunters may also
Be in the forest.
be in the forest,
Yeah, that's
when it's dark as per state, according to state regulations, or as per.
that makes sense.
Hunters may also,
Be in the forest
okay,
before dawn and after dark per state regulations.
yep, right.
Is that a real QR code? Like it'll click in and you'll get to something? Ooh. Where will you go? Like, is it posted on the town website?
So say that again, hunters may also be in the forest.
Hunters may also be in the forest before dawn and after dark per state regulations.
Yeah,
So that's for dragging deer out and setting up.
Mhm.
early in the morning.
Or just, you
Walking around.
hunt until dusk and then you walk out, but it takes a while.
Nice job.
number 3.
Yeah, this is a big one.
I would say designated on trails and get rid of authorized. And because at this point, we haven't designated some trails pedestrian and other trails not pedestrian, right? That's we're working towards that.
Mhm.
I think that's true. It should say on trails.
Well,
Well, if we're working towards it, it can't hurt to say that. You just don't want people to think like, oh, we could bike anywhere in the forest and now we can't.
No, well, there's 2 things that are labeled trails on that map currently.
Oh, okay.
And so the language, and so if we go back to the map,
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
those using a bike should say, couldn't we just say mountain biking is allowed
on
on
trails
specific
Yeah.
trails?
or designated trails.
Yeah, that's what I think that makes more sense than people thinking they're gonna look and see what's a trail versus a not a trail. Because it does say vast trail, but then it says no bikes.
should we go back to the map to resolve
Look
this?
back to the map for a second.
But you said this isn't the map you're going to use.
No, it needs some more revision, but that might help clarify this piece of the.
I think as a user going in and seeing, if you're cycling in and seeing these are the 2 trails I can go on, makes it a lot easier. If it just says cyclists are allowed on this trail and that trail on designated trails, or you could even list the trails under the rules. Like
Yeah,
It's true. That might be the best way to do it.
that's much easier. I also think we shouldn't open it up. Yeah, I mean, some of those trails are very hikeable, but not bikeable at all. So
We didn't label the trails on the map. It's just a wrong map. They don't have label names on them, but
we could color code them, or we could say,
yeah, they are.
yeah, that's the edit that I had proposed is to make both trails either red or green. There's currently one red one and one green one.
That's perfect.
And not to parenthesize allowed uses, but just say these are the trails.
Yeah.
And then the 10 rules actually designate that.
Yeah.
Because that seems a little hard to filter through what's allowed here. And I do like the idea of having pedestrian only trails, but at this point we don't have the alternatives in place. So like in our trail plan, there's multiple trails, so cyclists could use one.
Right.
So I'm confused.
So the red,
Why are vast trails no bike? If they're some of the most open, like why would it be no bikes on the vast trail?
I don't know. Yeah, but it shouldn't be.
Well, I think we would need to, I think one of us would need to go there and scope it and make sure that it was appropriate if we were gonna list it to the public that it was a trail you could ride a bike on. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, no,
It's not maintained, so it might not be suitable.
Right.
or maybe it's not maintained, that maybe that's the reason, but I like it actually down there. It's like super clear. Okay, bikes on these two colors, no bikes on these two colors. So you're saying to remove the bikes and no bikes,
Yeah, because that's dictated in the rules.
but it'd be really nice to see it on the map somehow.
So you like that?
Yeah, whether this is exactly it, I can't tell because it's a little confusing. There's red colors when there's no red in the key. There's all these other things. So, but if we did a key, I think it's to have to look at the map and then the key and go back and forth and know the world trail. It says designated trails, but then you look at the map and nothing's designated. So it seems like the map should make it clear as well. If it doesn't take too many words.
Yeah, I think after the trails, roads, and whatever you're gonna have as those legend items, if it could just say in pedestrians, I would just say, like you have pedestrian and skiing only. I think that works. But I think it should say, instead of bikes allowed, it should say pedestrians and bikes, because we don't want people to think that it's bikes only.
Right.
And then, so it can just, I think it can just say, pedestrian and skiing only, pedestrians and bikes. And then instead of no bikes under former vast trail, it just says pedestrian and skiing only. So it's uniform, so it's the same for everything.
Right,
Yeah.
but
Or-
then what does this mean? We want pedestrians there, but we're trying to say it's unmaintained. Should we say something like unmaintained, discouraged, or should we just take that off and take them off the map?
We talked about taking them off the map, and I think the reason that they were left on the map was to orient people who might be using the forest, but that was our main.
Yeah, and I don't see any reason why a pedestrian couldn't go walk up there. It's
I
not.
do.
Yeah, they do.
But when we write pedestrian only on it, makes it sound like, oh, we're managing this for pedestrians. Like maybe we should just write unmaintained or something.
And just with no,
Well, that's what it says that.
Well,
Well, then just get rid of the parentheses afterwards. But then we're not clear, there's no bikes.
Yeah, Ian.
I don't know.
I feel we have to go back to the easement, which says mechanized access. I think it is may be permitted at the discretion of the grantors if such uses are regulated in the management plans and are consistent with provisions relating to ecological protection. So, I'm as a new member of the relatively new member of the committee, I'm sort of confused about where trail use regulations exist. They're not in the management plan. The management plan states no new trails without Vermont Land Trust prior written approval. So I don't know which, if any, trails did get that approval. And the management plan also says, interestingly, hiking trails in deer wintering areas are closed, should be closed during winter months. So, we do have, if we're the Supreme Court and we're the originalists, then this is where we have to start the discussion in terms of, what is a trail and what is a trail that has been designated as mechanized, that is bicycle use. I think there's precedents. I mean, I think, I understand people go on Urbanic Way, and when Urbanic Way was constructed, maybe it was constructed as a multi-use. I really don't know. Same thing for Meadow Meander, but the Vast Trail was actually advised against being a multi-use trail by Arrowwood. They raised, I think, mostly the condition of the Vast Trail, other than in winter, as being, having wet sections and it wouldn't be appropriate for multi-use. I think was the opinion in the Arrowwood report. So, and then and actually, there's another one, Dana's Way, which Dana's Climb, isn't it? Which is a relatively new trail, doesn't appear on the concept map.
Yeah, that's the green one, which
that's the green.
I was advocating for turning red. That I don't see a reason to have it pedestrian only now. We had proposed making it pedestrian only in the final trail plan because there were alternatives. But my sense is that it'll work fine as a trail with shared use. And
I suppose I'm really appealing for people who've got a longer memory of this committee than I do, which is only, well, I've been watching the committee for a while, but I'm just not aware of any records of which trails are identified, which trails that appear on this map, which are existing ones, and the trails and roads which have been designated as bicycles permitted.
We never went through a distinct process. Like the only two that were built were this one and this one. Am I right? And so the idea at the time was multi-use. We didn't really designate it one way or another. These up here, are not buffered against various ecological features and stuff. So it violates the conservation easement if we encourage use of these. And I don't know what the problems were here, but I believe that is in a place that was also in at least a wet area or something. There was some issue with that.
Ian, can I make one comment as we're deciding this? I just want to get back to the purpose of doing with this, which is to not litigate everything forevermore of what it's going to be, but to get something out of the trailhead that would be useful to users now that may be changed in the future.
Yeah, so I mean, I know when we discussed this, you were saying that there should be some language which implies that these are the map and the list of rules, regulations, whatever, is subject to change. Or I think that was the concept that you were pushing. So I think that now comes to the full committee is that what we want to do then? Is that a proposal that we post a map and we post these rules as like temporary or provisional rules subject to change?
Well, I don't know if we have to do. I mean, I think all rules are provisional in that.
It's kind of
things change. Committee members change. Rules can change.
But we have an obligation to be consistent with the management plan.
Right. I mean, I think if we're very well, where are you seeing an inconsistency with the management plan in the rules? Just in allowing bicycles on two of the trails?
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, two points in the management plan. One is mountain biking is only allowed on designated trails. So that it needs to, somehow we need to establish what are designated trails. And then it also says no new trails without prior written approval by Vermont Land Trust. And it, well, and then it has that thing about closing trails during wintering season.
And then something about ecological
trails must be right consistent with the ecological
Yeah.
concern, the protection zone.
Yeah. So I think though, we don't need to change our 10 rules. It just seems to be that the map, we need to straighten out, just what's there now, what we think bikes are allowed to following the management plan, what we think other people are allowed to following the management plan, and where we should specifically say, maybe, we'd rather you don't use this, but those roads, hunters, that's how any of those amazing forest roads, that's how people access the top. I see dog walkers all the time. That's where hunters go. So people are going to use that. So at some point we have to figure out what we're going to do about those roads. But we don't have a trail system up there yet. So I could see how we just could wait on that.
I guess really what I'm saying is, we should not be seen as making up rules as we go along.
But I think we can just edit that map a little, sort of what you had in mind, and then keeping these things in mind you just reminded us of, and have another one to review at the next meeting.
Yeah, and this is an urgency, isn't it? This is a high priority to get something on that kiosk that tells people.
It's a real low-hanging fruit. It's positive. It's something should have been done a long time ago. We can do this.
And it'd be nice to have for hunting season, but not critical because people already know where they go.
There now are some very faded maps that are difficult to look at.
Which don't show trails.
So we're going for simple and clear.
So
to be changed.
So can you take a shot at another map and bring it back next?
Bring it back next time.
Yeah, so this is going back to the subcommittee based on the discussion now to revise the map and the material for the.
It does feel like a little bit of a runaround because I think 2 of the 3 of us suggested edits and it didn't happen, and now we're pushing it back a month. And so I don't see how we're not going to run into the same thing.
Well, who does the editing then?
Ian, you had the edits, right? But we had, I think Melissa and I were agreed upon some edits, and our idea was to bring those edits to this meeting.
Yeah, and I didn't get a chance to do that.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine, but it does. I mean, I think people are going to figure it out. This is not. I don't think this is like super urgent.
No, I think that's a really good point. I'm sort of feeling like we're letting the good get in getting the perfect get in the way of the good. Like we have a really good thing. We're on our way to having a good map with some just like color changes, and we were handed a management plan and an easement and already previous users in this forest, and we're not saying that we're now solidifying this forever for all time, but what we're saying is here are the uses that are happening, and we are going to regulate that to the best of our ability given these rules, and to make sure that people stay safe and they know where they can go and where there's biking's allowed, where it's not allowed. I think that we are never going to get to perfect, and as long as we try to, we will end up just spinning our wheels month after month. So I think we should empower the subcommittee to have the final say, to print the maps and to put up this good information.
Yeah,
I may be a minority voice, but I think we should look at it again. I think we benefited by having this conversation today, looking at what the committee thought was an imperfect map.
do you want to look at the map again?
I think we should look at the map again.
Okay.
And I think it should be done publicly because the map is for the public. And if it's shown and posted in a public meeting, then people who are confused by it or whatever in the public can also comment on it. And it seems like we're investing money in putting up something. We should,
I think
it's worth it.
Money.
Who's going to print it?
Or
the
I
town?
was going to print it on
and
Jericho's printers. I can't believe I said that loud.
It's going to Staples. I'll pay for it.
No, but I just think if we're going to put it up, we're close, but it just seems like also it'd be nice for the public we have a number of people who regularly attend our meetings. They might be able to look at it and tell us we messed up.
Okay.
Staples.
So let's what are the changes? Number 1, the green and the red are all going to be
Either green or red.
pick one.
Red looks easier to see to me.
So red.
Change red plus green to all red.
And then the red would say on the legend, pedestrians and bikes allowed.
And that will say in parentheses.
Yes. In parentheses.
Pedestrian plus bikes allowed.
Route 2 probably shouldn't be orange.
2.
Just, and
The
you know, we
trails,
just,
is it?
I don't know that we need to do it right now.
Okay, Route 2 color.
Difficult to change Route 2 color because that's in the background map. So
That,
but we'll,
Okay.
I'll work with
And
that.
maybe we change the top, doesn't be.
Black over it.
No, or
Try
maybe if we
painting
just
over
change
those.
it to, I don't know, dotted lines or something that looks less.
Okay.
Yeah, are you writing all these down, Melissa?
Yeah, I
Send
didn't
it, yeah,
think
thanks. Send them to
that.
me.
I'm writing these down. Route 2, change.
I tell you, I'm a terrible minute taker. I'm like my ADD is on full display.
You're on total me. I'm just taking these for just this for our subcommittee. Okay. The unmained, I can't see the bottom of the thing. Can you?
No, it's the, oh, can you slide it to the side?
I
it's
can
not
read it to you,
covered.
Melissa. It says unmaintained forestry roads.
Okay, unmaintained forestry roads will be dotted. Can you do that, Ian?
I can make them dotted, yeah.
And you wanted a different color?
Can they be the same color as the pedestrian only trails? So the
Like currently green, it would be.
yeah, the ones that are trails says pedestrian and skiing only.
So green,
Yes,
you
so
want the unmaintained trails dotted with the color green.
yeah, and then trails, the pedestrian and skiing only can then be solid green. And then that distinguishes trails that are maintained that are sort of set aside for pedestrians and skiing versus ones that are the unmaintained ones.
Okay.
Boundary looks great. Property boundary.
What else do you want? The part about.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Lisa. Sorry, we're just seeing your comment.
Should roads be on its own line, or are you going to keep roads and trails together? Oh, they're both called trails, sorry. Trails pedestrian only, then red would be trails pedestrian and bikes. I don't know.
Yeah, but Dana's climb will be.
Will now be.
How did Dana's climb get its name?
It's not going to be Dana's Climb in the future. It was named after someone who builds trails, but did not build that trail. That's what I
We
learned.
might have helped out with it. I don't know. I was at those 2 work days. I don't remember. We split
Well, the other thing that we approved as a committee for the revised management plan, should we ever revise it, is that we would name future trails with sort of Abenaki names.
So-
and so I'm just,
We weren't going to put any names on. this
okay,
map.
right. Okay.
No trail names on
Yeah.
this.
Yeah,
map.
that's
It's
good.
just a
Mhm.
quick and dirty. You're looking, you're in the parking lot. Okay, what's here?
There's Julian. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Julian.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm late. Scheduling children madness, as some of you can relate to.
No worries.
You're saying some of us can't.
I am.
Okay, anything else, Melissa, that you need in terms of the map? I think that was all the categories.
Okay.
Great.
Were you gonna do the dotted line?
I'm sorry, what?
Were you gonna do the dotted, Celia?
Yeah, they got
Yeah.
that down.
The dotted line, will
Forest
be
roads, yeah.
the unmaintained forestry,
Forest roads.
Roads.
I wouldn't even call them forestry because
unmaintained,
some of them are old farm roads, actually.
unmaintained
Forest roads.
elite forestry, just forest.
Just
roads.
forest roads, yeah.
The unmaintained forest roads will be dotted and they will be in the color green.
Thank you. Thank you for your work on this.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
Melissa, you're gonna send me what you run down.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm just looking at the agenda and our time, and I do want to save time for any public comment about this.
We have one in the chat. I had it up
Yeah.
in a minute ago.
Yeah. But I just want to, looking at our agenda, we had a piece at the end about if people had individual projects they were excited about. And I'm wondering if we can bump that to next time, unless someone is really wanting to talk about a project they're excited about. I'd be happy to save time or try to fit that in, but
Did we,
maybe we can bump
so
that.
we don't know if there are any?
I don't know.
Okay, that's just like a standing agenda item. It's a nice one to have.
I know, I feel good about it too, but we're running very short of
Oh,
time.
that's good.
But we can all be thinking about it in the
Yes,
meantime.
yes. And then I can.
You know, we've sort of folded together some subcommittee report and the kiosk materials.
Yeah.
So if we have dealt with both of those, we would be on to the RFP for
Right.
the writer.
I can do. I'll try to be quick about the RFP. And that's work we can do in the next month, and then we can move on to the second to last agenda item. Does that sound good to folks? So we'll skip the very last one, and I'll try to be quick about mine. But I want to open up to any public comment for that last discussion item, see if anyone has anything to say. And there was a comment in the chat, just so folks know.
That was
From Lisa.
That's, you know, that's come up to the point of, I think it's the same thing.
Yeah, and
twice.
Lisa makes a good point. It says bike trails should say only on designated trails and not should stay. And I agree with that too. That's good language instead of a should to say, to be like must or, you know, only on designated. Because it says, you know, it aligns with the language of here are the rules and regulations versus suggestions. Great. So moving on to the next agenda item. So Ian and I had talked and wanted to move forward the idea of hiring a consultant to help us with management plan revisions. And I've reached out to a bunch of folks that I know through work and looked at different consulting companies. So I've been sort of putting out the feelers of who might be able to do this work and have time and be a good fit with us. And so the way that this would work is we would craft an RFP, a request for proposals, and then we would have to, you know, we would have to get basically bids from contractors / consultants who might be interested in doing this work. That's something we're happy to do. Like I would be happy to do that as part of my work. But we also want to make sure that with this committee that we are all on the same page in terms of when we write the RFP, basically what we're saying is here's the ideal person, and it'd be great if we're all on the same page in terms of what that person might be, right? So that's like, what skills do they bring to this work? What are the deliverables? You know, what is their areas of expertise? Those types of things. So I think maybe the thing to just kind of bring to this committee is, I know we're sort of thinking we would talk about that type of stuff, but I think we can try to talk about that in 5 minutes. I'd be happy. Well, why don't we do this? Let me back up a second. Why don't we spend 5 minutes? And if people do have, as I do my searching and as I talk to people, are there things you want me to consider in terms of a good fit for someone we would work with? And I can take those notes. And when I'm doing my searching and sleuthing, which all that information will come back to you all, but are there things you want me to know as I'm kind of digging into this and thinking about writing that RFP, which you all will be able to edit as well?
I mean,
Get a good person.
yeah. So, I mean, obviously it's going to be, or maybe it's not obvious to me. We can do requests for bids because it's below a certain amount for the town. Is that correct? Do we know the bid?
Yeah, I have to figure out whether it's a bid or proposal. Yeah, so I have to figure that out. And what I'm trying to figure out with communicating with folks is like, how much does this stuff cost? So I even know what number to bring to ask about, right? Is this like $1,500? Is it $5,000? Is it, you know, I have to learn more about that.
They charge, like, would they base that on an hourly fee, or are they just bidding on a whole, like, I mean, obviously in their minds, they're breaking it down hourly.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, and we could say if they do it on an hourly fee, it's up to a certain amount of time if we keep it under the
But I think
standard.
the town insists on a format that focuses on deliverables, so that hourly rate is, you're not paying an hourly rate, you're paying for the deliverable. So there's a grand total, it's not a flexible amount based on the number of hours that the person spends on it. They have to bid. You know, if I'm bidding on it, I say, well, that looks like about 100 hours, so I'm going to say 10,000 and 100 an hour.
Typically, the bid includes your sort of budget justification. So typically it just says, this is the max, these are the things we want, these are the qualifications. And they submit their qualifications, what they think they can do, and they might break down a rough budget with that and a total. And if our amount is too low for what we're asking for, some bidders I've seen will say, okay, I could do this much for this amount. But this is my hourly rate. If you want the other thing, it would be this much more. So there is some flexibility afterwards if we had to go back to the select board for permission. And this has to be approved by, this is Conservation Commission funds.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have to give them a number that we want up to a certain amount.
Yep. Cecilia, do you have any person or organization in your mind who you might recommend I look into, or?
Well, I would have, one idea is to reach out to, say, graduates of the Field Naturalist program, because one of their projects is typically to write management plans. So they have a sense of the pieces. What?
Like Hannah, isn't she on?
Like Hannah, exactly. And yeah, they can be, that program's been around for a long, long time. So they can be of any variety of ages and expertise at this point. But I don't know if they have their own personal network. So specific organizations or individuals, I can't think of at the moment.
I have a bunch that I'm thinking of, so I don't, I can run with those, but if anyone else has any other. Julian, do you have a comment? I see your hands up.
I have a couple questions and a comment. It sounds like Cecilia and Daniel have both worked with people who could be qualified for this. I'd be curious to get your reflections on the kinds of qualities that we would be looking for. And I'm wondering if Nick and Caitlin might have some people who they might know who they could recommend as well.
Yeah, one thing that I'd really like to see is somebody who can help us, and maybe they can't. Maybe we have to figure out somebody else. But I think monitoring will be an important part of our trail stewardship and other things going forward, particularly if we take a sort of adaptive management approach. So, under the list of would be nice kind of things might be expertise in developing monitoring plans or things like that, in addition to management plans. So we want a good management plan writer, but we're also going to have to think about monitoring. And if somebody has both those skills, that'd be really cool. And then obviously talking with Josh to figure out how to solicit the bids, because we can't just go to people we know and say, oh, here's this opportunity. I still think it has to be publicly advertised, even if it's just get 3 bids, but it might not be the full on RFP process.
There's some kind of dollar limit, I think, that triggers the whole.
Yeah, that
I can't remember.
Yeah, but even if it's just requests for bids, I still think there may be some kind of public disclosure part, but that's a Josh question.
Let's assume we need competitive bidding at this point. Because this is, I mean, my view of it is that this is a substantial task. And I think I like to sort of work backwards and say, what's the deliverable? Well, the deliverable is a new management plan. I believe, I mean, that's our goal. I mean, we would obviously approve, and then the select board would approve, but that's the deliverable. Actually, it's sort of a question that I introduced in this draft that's in the packet, includes sort of 2 deliverables. One is a preliminary proposal that we discuss and the public has input into, and then that goes back to the consultant. So that there are 2 stages to the deliverable. Well, how do you get to that point? Well, you have to consider input, and the input is the 2018 management plan, the proposed revisions that have been made over the last 5 years, sort of culminating in the spring of this year, and all the public input that's been provided. through the online methods and attendance at this meeting and so on. So there's minutes of this meeting, of this committee. Those are all things that this consultant would be requested, in my mind, would be requested to review and incorporate us to the best ability into a revised management plan. Also, ideally, taking into account management plans for similar, let's say, town forests in Vermont. I mean, there are several of them, and they have management plans. Maybe some of them would actually provide good models for us.
Yeah, I think they could use that as a resource. I don't think that is like a top tier item that they're going to pull in things from other towns' management plans. I think that would be a resource material.
It could be something you specify that you want them to do. Mm-hmm. You could say, in doing that, we want you to review all these public materials. We want you to look at these 5 town forests, or let them look at some town forests, make suggestions. You can put that in, specify as something you think is good for them to do. And it also signals to them that if they did do that, they should put that in their proposal and their bid to say, oh yeah, I already wrote 3 town forest plans. Mm-hmm. And so what we ask for kind of signals to them what they should tell us about, which would justify our choices. So we can ask for things, and there's usually 2 tiers, right? There's like, this is must have, and then these are would be nice. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if that's probably what you're asking is what's the list of must have, what's the list of would be nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think part of my must have, going back to like what is the end goal, is to have someone who can really synthesize the information and present something really clear to us in terms of a vision that prioritizes certain aspects of management, and then to ask the question, does this work for you all? And then there's also the opportunity for other folks to weigh in on that. But I think unless we have clear guidance, it's really hard to kind of move forward on other aspects of the management plan. So I'd love to see someone who can synthesize a lot of information and then sort of say, here's a whole bunch of stuff. Here's my distillation of that. Do you all agree that this is, where the direction that the management plan should go?
Yeah, ideally, we're supposed to have the vision, right? And then they're supposed to help us draft it. So you're asking them to sort of help us phrase the vision from original sources. That might be a challenge.
Well, I don't know if it's so much that as even just helping us to organize the information so that we can review it and make those decisions. I think part of what I mean, just being honest, part of what I've struggled with is we have so much information in so many different places, and it's like overwhelming to think about, okay, where do I even start digging in? And certain things can take on more importance only because they're like more accessible, or I've read that more often. But we have like public comments, and we have different engagement events, we have the management, and there's all these things. So I think if someone could help us kind of walk through that and kind of like shepherd the process, but we're ultimately the stewards of that information. That's what I would love to see. But Julian, you had a comment.
Well, I think I'm more aligned with Cecilia on that, Daniel, because I think we want to set this person up for success as much as possible. And so in order to be successful, they're going to need some clear guidance from us. We can't really outsource the difficult questions to this poor individual who inherits this RFP. We have to solve those difficult questions before we hand off to them, I think. So what I think you're describing are 2 different jobs. One, can somebody go through, cull, and summarize and present the sort of their understanding of the summary of these previous products? And then 2, we would have to sort of give guidance on how we want them to draft according to those documents. And 3, they would draft. But I think we would be setting them up for a really difficult, possibly impossible job if we just hand them a big stack of documents and ask them to write it for us. I don't think they would be successful if we did that.
Right. Yeah.
So
I agree.
What I was going to do is just right now start drafting you an email as we finish up the meeting of must have. would be nice kinds of things.
Yeah,
Would that be
that's
helpful
great. Yeah,
for
that'd be
you?
super helpful. Yeah.
And yeah, because I think also being willing to interact with the public, being able to come to our public meetings, help explain where certain things came from, I think would be useful.
Yeah.
And I'm beginning to think like Ian, that this is a big task. It's not a little
Right.
thing I draft up over the weekend kind of thing.
Right.
Like, okay, this person's committing a chunk of time over time.
Right.
Okay.
No, this has all been super helpful. Thank you. These are good.
It does seem also worth clarifying if it's a goal of all of us that they significantly, or they really try to prioritize condensing and fishing out redundancies to try to create a simpler document, and that might be someone's strength more than another person's.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a qualification ideally is somebody who's already written a management plan for a town forest.
Yeah. Chase, I think that's in my long-winded way, that's sort of what I was getting at is like, can someone have like kind of put the redundancies in one place and say, here's all the places where it says this one thing, tell me what you want this to say. And we can say, we mean this. And then they take that statement and it goes in where, you know what I mean? Something like that. But I've heard you all have good perspectives on this. That's really helpful. If anything else comes up in the next week or so, just shoot me an email and I'll keep that in mind as I.
We should run the management plan through ChatGPT and make sure ChatGPT doesn't do way better.
Yeah.
Actually, I like
And in the end of the day,
We did it with a grant application on another board I'm on just for fun, and it came out with a really nice grant application. And we're like, oops, this is too good.
and ultimately the RFP is sent out by the town, and the town manager and the assistant.
Yeah.
You know, that's part of their job is to
Yeah.
ensure that an RFP is correct.
Yeah. Ian, could you bring up the chat? I think someone made a comment.
yes.
I just want to make sure. Does anyone from the public
I
have any
can read it actually.
comments on that agenda item before we move on? You just-
Marcy, how I can.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Clear guide. Yeah, Marcy said agree that clear guidance from the ACFC is really important. So thanks. Brett,
I'd second that too, but just kind of a housekeeping detail. You know, when you're talking money and estimates and stuff with a contractor or in the RFP, if there are checkpoints to see how you're doing towards the budget, I think back to Sinuoski and Arrowwood, and I think one of the places we got tripped up was it felt like a take it or leave it when we got it, because they said, well, that's it, we blew the budget, it's gone, we have time to go to one more meeting for you guys and that's it.
Right.
And you know, it would have been nice if like in March instead of May, we heard, holy God, you know, we're 80% of the way through the money, but we're only 50% of the way through the job.
Right.
Something like just some check.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yep. Thanks, Brett. Great. In the last couple of minutes, so we have an email in the packet. Couple ways we can approach this. One thing that Ian and I have thought about is just order of operations in terms of anything we might do with zoning, which is we want to learn more about the regulations as they apply, but what we don't want to do is to create a trail plan in accordance with a zoning administrator and Act 250 and then submit that to the select board, only to have the select board say, nope, change this, this, and this, and this, then have to go back to the zoning administrator and folks at Act 250. So
I want to say just one thing about that order of operations. I can almost guarantee I'm putting on, like, pretending I'm a select person.
Yeah.
That if we bring them a finished management plan, that they will say, that's cool. Did you go to the zoning as it says in the 2020 when you got your parking and designation? Have you done that? So I think that
I know
I hear what you're saying, but I think these things have got to run concurrently. I think we have to work on all fronts at the same time. I think if we go on down this road and we wait for our writer and we get our management plan done, we bring it to the select board, one of the questions they will ask us is, it says here on 2020, you got your designation changed and you got your parking lot that you were subject to zoning. Have you done that yet? And then we'll be saying no. And they'll say, okay, we'll go back and do that and then come back.
So that goes towards the idea of, as we originally separated out, the management plan has more, is bigger and guides the trail plan and the trail stewardship plan. So maybe that we get the select board to approve the draft management plan, so we have the right direction, and then we tinker with the trail plan and then submit that to the review board. Maybe we say right in the management plan that we're going to do that step.
That sounds
so that way we can at least make progress on the management plan. I don't think we should tie them together.
Yeah. Melissa, do you know anything about changing the designation?
I
And
do, just a little bit. I'm not an expert on this. This is the only thing I know, that if we tried to change the designation, then I don't think we'd be able to build anything.
as change it back to forestry
If
ag.
we went to forestry ag, then we wouldn't be able to.
Why do you think we wouldn't be able to even put in a trail? Forestry puts in skid trails all the time, and they don't map that, doesn't go through the development review board all the time.
Why do I think we'd have to? Because that's what it says in our zoning rules and regulations.
That's because we're zoned as a recreational area.
Right. And so if you don't want to be zoned as a recreational area, then you can't put recreational things in. I think that's the way it is. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, we're actually a forest, but we're going to put recreation in here with trails and bridges and parking lots and things like that. So, but I'm not the arbiter of this. This is not my area of expertise. No shape or form. I've never taken anything, not even a driveway to zone. So don't count me as the expert. I say, let's not waste our time. Let's have Tyler come and tell you what he thinks.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe that would be
I already told us.
Yeah. And at our subcommittee meeting, that was agreed to send 2 questions to Tyler. And one was, well, if it did revert to forestry agriculture, what would change? And the second question, what was that? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
I wrote them to him. I can.
I am here, guys, too, as well. So sorry, I just joined.
Oh.
Is Tyler here?
Oh, great. Oh my God, this is perfect.
Hi, Tyler.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I raised my hand. I wasn't sure if you see me. I just got out of I teach a martial arts class one day a week, so we just wrapped up. So I'm calling from the parking lot right now, so apologies if it's a little choppy.
Oh, no worries.
I hear you well.
Yeah, thank you for joining. So we were just discussing the order of operations, like what our process should be in terms of determining how we move forward with any potential trail plan. And I think one of our questions is, we changed the designation, or I guess the past committees changed the designation of the town forest for the parking lot. And
when we did the parking lot, I don't know if it was for the parking lot.
Oh, when we did the parking lot. And if that designation were to change back, does that mean that any trail development would not be allowed in the forest?
That is correct. That is correct. So you had the change in use to allow the trails. So you can't have the trails without the use, unfortunately. And trails are a tricky thing, because if you look at our definition section, you will not find a definition of a trail. They are referenced in a few spots in the regs. There's one that notes that trails are an allowed use in all districts, but it doesn't define kind of what makes something a trail. It doesn't say if a trail is a structure. It doesn't really say, like, is it exempt from zoning? Is it not? Is it considered land development? Is it not? So my job is, in kind of the difficult situation that I'm in, is to try and figure out, like, if you don't have a use that neatly fits into a hole, right? I have to kind of find the one that's closest to it and kind of put the round peg in the square hole, if you may.
Right.
Right. It's kind of one of those deals. So, and if you look at, my memo kind of goes into a little bit more detail as to my logic as to why I think you guys would need to have site plan review, is that the site plan criteria specifically reference, for that conditional use, reference that the board has to approve or is supposed to have approved location of trails. And the reason, unless I decide that it doesn't for whatever reason. And the reason that I think that it really should go back to the board is, again, rather than just have me deciding where trails go, right? Having it go back to the board makes it a much more open and transparent process. And the community has an opportunity to weigh in on where those trails can go. And it's just a lot more open process than just me deciding where stuff goes. Because the board, when they approved it, if you look at what was originally submitted to get the approvals for conditional use, it was very limited in scope. In fact, I think it was all the trails that they showed were below the power line there, where the Belco or whoever it is has that big cut that runs through the property. So none of the trails were up above that were shown to the board. The Arrowwood report, which is certainly quite thorough, was not used at all, and wasn't shown to the board at all. So they never had an opportunity to weigh in on any of it. I just feel like for that and the other reasons I noted in the memo, I just feel it's appropriate to go back to the Development Review Board and just really make sure that we know where stuff's going, right? Because when I issue a permit, typically it's for a specific structure in a specific location, right? So like if we're going to have a trail, we need to know exactly where the trail's going to go. And if we need to tweak it, that's fine, but there's going to be a process to tweak it. We can't just say, okay, well, on Monday the trail's going straight, and then on Tuesday the trail looks like we decided it'd be easier to have it go, 50 feet to the right. You know what I mean? So that's one of those things where we just have to be precise in what we're doing. And it's not being anti-trail. You guys can put as many or as few trails up there as you want, right? We just have to make sure what we put up there, complies with the regulations, and that we know where it is and that it's permitted appropriately. But other than that, kind of sky's the limit in terms of how many that you want to put in there in terms of, so long as that they can comply with the regs. So I'm not sure what's more helpful to you guys. You just want to ask me, keep asking me questions. I'm happy to answer it. Like, I know I kind of hopped in when you guys were halfway through it. So
I have a quick question, if it's okay. I
Sure.
think having the Development Review Board review it is not a problem. That'd be great. The question I think that we're worried about is maybe the cost of having an engineered site plan at a certain slopes. And do you have any sense how much something like that would cost? And
I unfortunately don't, but unfortunately, if you reference that section, if you look at my memo where I reference that section of the regs, that unfortunately is a GAL. That's not an optional thing. So the board has the option to waive certain site plan requirements, as I noted in my memo as well. And, and so as far as how the DRB process kind of works, right, it's really, once it's in the DRBs, in front of the DRB, it's their ball game, right? I can make all the recommendations in the world I want to. I can give them, a 20-page thesis as to why they should do something a certain way, and they can completely ignore me. And that's it's their purview at that point. And it's your job is kind of being to make the case as to why you do or don't need to have a professional, site plan done by one of the professionals I noted in my memo. So that being said, however, there are certain shalls, and on any land development that's on that 20% slope, it has to be done by an engineer. Now, there's two ways I think we could go about doing it. Is you could hire, or the town would hire and put out an RFP and hire an engineer specifically for this project. Or we take kind of what you have in the Arrowwood report and the other stuff. Maybe that's sufficient. I don't know. And if the town engineer says, yeah, this is enough for me to, to be able to decide whether or not this is going to comply to our regulations, then great. If it's not, then we're going to have something else done. And I'm open to doing either one, but it does have to be reviewed by an engineer if it's on 20% slopes or more.
So did you say we have a town engineer? Or
we have one on retainer. We have one on retainer. So let's say if the Development Review Board, because obviously, I'm not an engineer, right? My job is to interpret, rules and regulations. There's limits to what my technical expertise is. So usually if we're dealing with something like, stormwater systems, right? Does this comply with our public works specifications? We have Tyler Billingsley over at East Engineering, who's on kind of retainer for us, who serves as the town engineer, who we require the applicants to, it would be to supply money for a technical review fee. It's usually about $500 to start and goes up from there. And then he would review the application materials that the applicants submit and say, and give us our feedback. Like he had like this, they've supplied enough information to show that they comply. They haven't, he'll kind of look at it this way and kind of give it an up or down, whether it makes sense or not. So that's happened on like the Creamery building and usually larger projects. Most like smaller things don't usually have to go to the town engineer, and either I can decide it does or the board can decide it does, and it's their call to make.
Ian, do you have a question?
Well, I mentioned that it was actually on Friday that I wrote to Tyler with a couple of points and pointed out that we weren't expecting a reply or a opinion over the weekend, but just sort of for the record, what I did in that email on Friday was to point to the Arrowwood materials and then ask the question, to what extent would the Arrowwood materials constitute adequate documentation for the trails plan? I realize that a site plan would have other elements to it as well, but basically the question is, would the Arrowwood proposed trails plan be acceptable as part of a site plan?
Yeah, absolutely. You could include as much material as you want. Now, the real thing that we have to decide, right, or you guys would have to say, it doesn't absolve you from that requirement of having the actual site plan provided by one of the licensed professionals I noted there. You can request a waiver from that standard, right, if you feel that, that what you have in your report is sufficient for the Development Review Board to make their decision, right? And that's where you would make your waiver request. You would, again, make the argument to the board as to why what you've supplied is sufficient. I would make the argument as to, in my staff notes, as to whether or not I agree with that. I would make my recommendation, and I think I've been pretty clear that just given the amount of complexity with the project, I feel, and given the fact that you're going to have an engineer look at the stuff that's on 20% slopes anyways, you might as well look at the whole thing. But again, at that point, it's the board's ballgame. So they can either agree with me or not, and if they decide that they have enough to go on with just the Arrowwood report, that's fine, even not regardless of whether or not I personally agree with it. So that is an option that you have, to avail yourselves of. But again, I would also, what I would, be hesitant to have you guys do is to go in there thinking it's going to work. It doesn't work. Then we have to continue the application, right? Now that's going to take you at least another month before you have another hearing before the DRB. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of how a DRB process works for like conditional use. So I need a conditional use application on my desk 19 days before the meeting date. I have to get a public warning out within 15 days to the applicants. I have to post it in town, all sorts of that other stuff. Once after the board has its meeting, the board has up to 45 days to issue a decision. They can issue it inside of 45 days if they choose to. If it's not something that's very controversial, usually we could turn decisions around a little quicker. I have had them go right up to the wire though. So, and then once that goes through, the decisions are issued, there's an additional 30-day appeal period after that. So start to finish, you're looking at roughly, assuming no appeals, assuming no continuations or issues, a 3-month process to go start to finish through conditional use. That's roughly what the timeline is. And that's like no hiccups, smooth sailing. So it really depends. So like, again, the more holes in the application, the more questions the board asks, right? The higher the likelihood is that your application could be continued. And then that bumps out that process even more. And I'm a big fan personally of having very, very boring meetings, right? I like to have all the questions answered ahead of time as best I can. So that way we can We come in, we come out, we kind of know here's what it is, here's the facts. Does it comply? Does it not comply? And we move on. Because what the board doesn't get to do, the board isn't the planning commission, right? The board doesn't take the more philosophical, is this a type of use we want to see, right? That type of stuff happens in planning. Once that's decided and it's written into the zoning regs, it's our job to we're basically like football referees or baseball umpires. We call balls and strikes, right? We get the rule book, we look at it. So do you check all the boxes to get additional use approval? Yes, you do. No, you don't. If you don't, all right, is it something that we can take care of in conditions? If it is, we'll put some conditions on the permit. If it's something more serious, then we'd issue a denial. But that's kind of how it really works. You don't get to say, if you check all the boxes at the end of the day, you get your permit. We can't turn around and say oh, we don't like this use, even though it's allowed, we're not going to issue a permit. The DRB can't do that, or they're not supposed to. Let's put it that way.
So it sounds like this is not as complicated as the Creamery project. And if engineer review, we have one on retainer, might be as little as $500 to look at our trail plan. It sounds like, yep. Are you saying it's a good idea to do before we submit it to you and the DRB?
What we could do is so I can require you to do it as part of your application. So typically how I do it, there's two ways, again, as how this happens. I can say is that this project's big enough that I want to see this. I know the board's going to want to see it. You have to give it to me before I consider your application complete. Or I could say I don't really know if the board's going to want it. I'll leave it up to the board to decide whether or not they want to require technical review. And if they decide that they do, they would probably continue the hearing and then until such time as we can get the town engineer to look at your project. So that's typically how it works. Most of the time, I defer to the board on that, except in the rare instance, the Creamery, I just went ahead and did it. I required it ahead of time because I knew we were going to need it, just given the scale of it. So it could go either way. So if you want to do it ahead of time, I quite honestly would probably feel better with just requiring it in advance and having them look at it, because it could answer those questions as to whether or not you need to have it professionally done by a planner, by one of those professionals I mentioned. Now, again, there's no guarantee that he could come back and say that, hey, this isn't sufficient. I don't have enough information here. Then it is what it is, and then you're going to have to move forward from there and hire an engineer and do all that. But I'm willing to, to see if what's in the Arrowwood report is enough for him to make that determination on those trails that are over 20%.
Okay.
So Julian has his hand up. There's also a chat from Jeanette Malone, which I think is very relevant. She's basically saying, hey guys, you're getting too far ahead of yourselves here. But so should we hear from Julian first?
Sure, let's give Julian the floor.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I don't disagree with Jeanette at all. I think, but the order of operation, we just need to know what the order of things is, so we're not surprised. Is I think what we're trying to figure out here. But so Tyler, thanks a lot for that. I really appreciate your thoughtful consideration of all this stuff. And I want to just go back and make sure I understand something you said at the beginning. So we're talking about surface trails here, not any buildings, of course. And so are the people that you would recommend that we go with, do they do trails? I mean, or would they be more familiar with building plans? I mean,
well, that's what we got to figure out. I floated this to Tyler anyways, a little bit, hey, is this something that you could look at? He wasn't sure. And again, this might become one of those things, if it's not something that he can evaluate and say, because really what this is, the 20% slope thing is for, it's for development on there. Really, of the big issues is for erosion control, right? Now, why, a little mountain bike trail may not seem or a bike or a path might not seem like that big of a deal. I think you'll find that with all the flash flooding we had, right, those little trails turn into little streams rather quickly, depending on the amount of water and stuff that we have moving around in there. So that's really the logic behind it. And it is worth pointing out. Now, I did not unfortunately have not had the time to read the Arrowwood report verbatim. I have skimmed it some just to see I wanted to see where they showed some trails and there was some other structure things that were there. And it's worth pointing out, like, you know, those, there are structures as part of this trail park. You know, I think there's like 14 or 13 bridges that are proposed in there, along with some other walkways and stuff through more sensitive areas. And those, you know, those are obviously going to need to be permitted anyways, as will the location of all of the trails. And again, it's and the reason for it, like, if you look at our definition of structure in the zoning regs, it's written basically to give me the authority to basically call anything a structure. So I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but structure is defined as an assembly of material intended for occupancy or use. So that's pretty broad. So you stack a couple rocks on top of each other, right? You could make the argument that's a structure. Now, granted, you know, I use my judgment and that I don't, you know, obviously require people to, in most cases, to get permits for like patio furniture or other things that they put out and take down on a yearly basis. But theoretically, you could make the argument that that is a structure that requires a permit if you wanted to. I don't do that, but, you know, because that's, you know, that's a little common sense thing, but there that is written into there. So basically, if there's any question, it's a structure, basically. And the definition of land development, it doesn't deal with clearing of trees specifically, but it does talk about like changes in use and like use of land. So if we're putting trails on land, you're using that land for you know, that recreational purpose, it does count as land development and should be permitted. Now, granted, you know, there's different ways. Another option you guys could consider is that, like, okay, if you wanted to request that waiver, let's say the board gives you the waiver for the stuff that's not on 20% slopes, because the board can't waive the 20% thing. That's a shall, and there's no waiver language there. But if they do opt to waive the other stuff, at that point, I would still require a permit for it. It just wouldn't have to be reviewed by the engineer at that point, if that's what the board decides to go through. It's a little complicated, but that's kind of what it is if they decide to go that route. I threw a lot at you, so I'm happy to take follow-up questions on that. And this is complicated stuff too. I understand this may be people's first time having to deal with the zoning regs, so.
No, Tyler, this is really helpful. Thanks. I think at this point we're gathering information, and we're about 25 minutes over our meeting, and but we're really appreciative of your time and wanted to kind of make sure that we got to hear from you, because this has been really helpful. I think we're going to take this and have it as a discussion item for our next meeting. But you'll definitely be, you know, I appreciate you being willing to talk to us about this. And so I'm sure you'll get an email from myself or Ian, just with maybe a couple follow-up questions. But we do have a couple, just one hand up from the public and then a couple chats. Ian, could you just put that up? So,
and I can't see the chat, guys, so you're going to have to read that.
So, Jeanette commented that she's concerned about the expenses for the site assessment on a trail plan without writing and getting select board approval for a solid management plan first, which theoretically would determine where trails would be most appropriate. And then Marcy commented that it seems like we've come full circle from this issue that she raised at the beginning of the meeting. And so those are, thank you for those comments. Those are helpful as well. And then Lisa has her hand up. And so I wanted to make sure. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Tyler. That was really educational. I want to ask the committee, has there been an assessment done of the forest after the July floods? Do we know what trails did really wash out? Or I would imagine you have a pretty good idea, if not, you know, a written idea. You've at least got some tribal knowledge, but that might be very helpful to an engineer who's reviewing your quote site plan unquote without really knowing the actual conditions on the ground. It's kind of hard to really tell where erosion might occur. It depends on how dense the soil is. It depends on what brush is around there. It's, you know, it's a difficult thing for an engineer. So they might be cautious and be concerned about everything at 20% and higher, or maybe there are some that are mostly rock or whatever that won't wash out. So some sort of an assessment by your group would probably be very helpful to someone reviewing the plans as they go forward.
Yeah,
thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Yeah, that's the fun stuff, right? Is going up in the actual forest and walking around and looking at stuff. So we'll take that.
Okay. Yeah, just put it down in writing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Well, I want to try to wrap up the meeting here. And so Tyler, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate that, especially post leading a
and I do have one quick thing for you. And I know there was some concern about like the impact this could have on like trail building as a whole and stuff like this. If there is, and this is just a kind of a plug, if there is a lot of concern about the fact that our zoning regulations really don't deal with trails in a particularly clear-cut way, that's something I'm sure the Planning Commission may be interested in looking at as to whether or not they want to flesh out a trail use and like, what does that mean? What does it mean when we say trails? Does it require a zoning permit? Does it not? Like those sorts of things. Because right now I'm trying to, you're trying to interpret it as best that you can. But I think that, this process, if anything, shows that the regulations, are somewhat ambiguous at best in terms of whether, to what extent or how trails are regulated or should be regulated. So that's something to bear in mind that I'm sure, you guys might want to consider maybe like talking to the Planning Commission about that at a future date and seeing if that's a change or there's some definitions that could be added to lend some clarity to it. But that's it. Like, again, I'm happy to help you out. I'm not really, for or against any particular project. I'm just trying to, I'll try and help you guys get through it as best I can, as much as I'm able to. You guys are going to have to do the legwork on it, but I'm more than happy to answer questions or, take a crack at interpreting something ahead of time if I'm able to. So.
Great. Thank you, Tyler.
With that, I'll turn it over to you guys. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Great. So the only other agenda item we had was about an email received, which I think in the context of just having this conversation, I think we can add that to our database of information we've gleaned and talk about that next time when we have a clear plan of what our process will be for moving forward with zoning and maybe talking to the Planning Commission and the work we have ahead of us, if folks are okay with that.
I'm sorry, that was an email about zoning?
Yeah, it was just about zoning.
Okay, but it's not posted on Related File.
No.
Okay.
Great. I just want to open up any comments from the public before we adjourn. And thank you all for joining us. Good to see you all. And for one person to actually see you here. Great. Well, thank you all for staying late.
Next meeting, if we want to just document that, it would be the 27th.
27th.
November, the fourth Monday.
Does that work for everyone? Everyone be sufficiently full from Thanksgiving?
Yeah, it's so after,
Great.
I probably won't. I'll be in Mexico actually for a work thing, but that's okay.
Okay.
Gonna be skiing in the notch season.
Yeah.
Though I may be able to tune in virtually. Actually,
now
that
that I think about it. No, it's okay.
So moved.
Okay. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Great. Thank you all.